Matt Drudge has been one of the most influential individuals in conservative media for decades. The Drudge Report was my homepage starting in college, and for many, many years after that was probably the single website I used the most as a news aggregator and was a part of my daily routine. And something happened to it recently, and we'll get into all that, where now it's not what it used to be. That's a simple way of putting it. We got somebody who's going to tell us about all of this. Matt Leshak is with us now. He has a book out, The Drudge Revolution, which you can get on Amazon. Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Buck. I appreciate it.
All right, so you're a biographer, in a sense, for Matt Drudge, correct?
That's right.
So did Matt sit down for you to talk to you about this, or is this an unauthorized biography?
It's an unauthorized biography. Matt, as you probably know, has been living in the shadows for nearly 2 decades. He's maybe given 3 interviews and has prided himself in not having his picture taken in I think, 8 years.
That's unusual. That is for sure. Tell us about Matt Drudge's origins and how the website became as powerful as it is.
Yeah, Matt Drudge's origins, it's a fascinating story. He came from a very dysfunctional family. His mother suffered from severe mental health issues. His father disowned him at a young age. And he was really a scrapper. He rose to prominence, at least in the early days of the internet, by working as a CVS gift shop clerk. And he was able to figure out that the Nielsen ratings were being deposited into the trash a day before they were released publicly. And he tried to pay attention to when the custodial staff will come in, and knew that there was a window where he could go in, get the Nielsen ratings out of the trash, post it online. And from there, he slowly continued to grow his website by in the early days, getting exclusive information a lot of times on Hollywood stories.
Huh. What were the biggest breaks in the early days for Drudge?
He found out that Connie Chung was going to be fired before she did. He got Bob Dole's running mate, right? It was a lot of Hollywood things, because what he would do is try to keep his ear to the ground as a gift shop clerk. And he'd have Roseanne Barr walking in. He'd be in the orbit of Sybil Shepherd. He'd be in the orbit of Jerry Seinfeld. I believe he was also first to report Jerry Seinfeld's salary demands. So it's interesting because now people, and I your intro is what people are talking about. Why has Matt Drudge made this turn? And one of the points I try to emphasize with people is that he's always looked at through this political lens. But the reality is, going through the research and looking at the Drudge Report over all these years and talking to over 200 people who I interviewed for this book, is that Matt's loyalty isn't to a political party or some ideology. His loyalty is to his website. And people don't really understand this. So let me give you an example. Andrew Breitbart worked for Matt as an AM editor for many years, was there from the very beginning. And in early 2008, Andrew Breitbart would be posting stories. Do you remember the Reverend Wright story?
Yes, of course.
Well, he would post Reverend Wright stories, and Matt, from whatever location he was at, would take them down and replace them with something more favorable to Obama. And this happened with a number of different stories. And unlike Matt, Andrew was a real true believer in his form of conservatism. And eventually he picked up the phone and he called Matt and he said, what's going on here? And Matt's response was very telling. He said, an Obama presidency might be horrible for the country, but it sure would be great for my website. And, it's hard to argue with at least part of that. I mean, Matt, you'd be challenged to find more than a handful of people who did better than Matt Drudge under the Obama administration. For example, I think his net worth right now is worth north of $100 million. So,
what was the Drudge Report making a year? I mean, I'm really curious. What was the Drudge Report estimated to be making in revenue year in and year out during the Obama years?
So that information is not public, but what was public was his page views, and they were at an all-time high. I mean, he was doing great, not just in page views, but in influence. And, so people now are asking, why has Matt made this leftward tilt? And I would ask him to re-examine their premise. I don't think Matt was ever, he describes himself as libertarian, but his website was never a political appendage to him. It was always a business. And, whether he's making a business calculation right now, and whether it pays off it's anybody's guess. But I'm confident, based on his history and the people who know him best, that that's exactly what's happening right now.
Speaking of Matt Leshak, he is the author of The Drudge Revolution. Matt, what were some of the more interesting things that you found out for this book about Matt Drudge? I mean, there's so many. So just by way of background, I found out about the Drudge Report early on. I think I was a freshman in college, and it just became a place that I started going to at a very young age. And so when I think about this, it had a major influence on my thinking, not just because of the headlines and the story that was told just by the editorial selection of what to post and how to describe what's posted, but also it was a gateway to so much else in conservative. I found Breitbart, I found Town Hall, I found all these different sites early on. I already knew about National Review, right? But there were all these other things that I found out about really because of the Drudge Report. You mentioned influence before. Give us some sense of how this guy, the Drudge Report was profoundly influential on my thinking about certainly conservative media and politics in this country. Can you just put into context for us either stories you've heard from people about that, or just a way for us to think about how this website that really does look like it's from 1995 and is a very straightforward concept was really pushing the national conversation a lot of the time?
You're 100% right. And one of the reasons I wanted to write this book was I believe in this generation, there's no individual who's had more of an impact on the way we consume information than Matt Drudge. And the story of his background has never been told. I mean, Matt rose up through came from, as I mentioned, a highly dysfunctional family. I mean, I went through tons of court papers that outlined just a really sad uprising. And nobody gave this guy anything. And he would rise up and essentially usurp and flip on its head the established media of the day. And we're all all these websites that you're mentioning, all these conservative websites, we're all sort of living in that shadow right now. And there's all this talk about, media and the interest in kind of how it got here. So I would contend it really began with Matt Drudge. As far as some of the more interesting facts that I found as young, his narrative as a child, his love of dance music, just sort of this picture that emerged of a very colorful character as a teenager. But I was also able to get Joseph Curl, who never spoke on the record about Matt before, and as Matt Drudge's only full-time employee he ever had. He was able to outline to me the entire philosophy of the Drudge Report and the nuts and bolts on exactly how it worked. And one of the things that Matt told him was, we don't ride the wave at the Drudge Report. We create the wave. So what we're going to do is we're going to find that story that matters to the people. We're posting it. Rush Limbaugh is going to talk about it in his A Block segment, and then at the White House, they're going to be asking about it at the press briefing. That's going to spawn 400 more stories, but we're off of it and we're on to the next thing. And that's how they operated. That's how Matt operated. And I think his impact, as you described it, you've created this large conservative platform, and like many other people, it largely began with you clicking on Matt Drudge.
Yeah, I've got to tell you the three. It's kind of I've never said this from the show. I mean, I'd say the three most influential conservatives on my thinking in terms of people who are in the media: Rush Limbaugh, Ann Coulter, and Matt Drudge.
Yeah, and you remember, I think you're a little younger than me, at least you look at it. The days was like 3 now.
Wait, Mr. Leshak, how old are you? Let's just get it out there.
I'm 40.
48?
Yeah, you're 40. Man, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I'm 38. I'm 38. A little behind you, but go ahead. You were saying.
You still kind of remember then the networks when media was controlled just a small handful of people, ABC, NBC, CBS, a few editors really decided what the news narrative was. And, people had stories about JFK, people had stories about Reagan, and they never made press because the gatekeepers of the news decided, well, Matt Drudge came along, and when that Newsweek was going to spike, when Lucy Ann Goldberg called him, it was this perfect marriage kind of technology and this individual. And from that point forward, I would say nothing's been the same anymore. The gatekeepers are gone. It's off to races.
Yeah.
You can trade that moment Matt Drudge clicked on enter.
It's fascinating. We wish we had we're losing some of you on the connection here, but look, the book sounds fascinating. I was excited to talk to you about this because I think that Drudge is one of the most influential and least understood people in media, and that's certainly something you deal with in the book. Guys, Matt Leshak, The Drudge Revolution is his book. It's on Amazon now. Matt, great work, man. Let us know how the book goes. Come back and talk to us.
Hey, thanks, Buck. I appreciate it.
All right. Going to get into our closing up shop here before we send you off to enjoy what will hopefully be a lovely, restful, relaxing weekend. But before we do that, got to make sure we hear from you. 844-900-BUCK, 844-900-2825. Producer Mark's favorite extra homework assignment, going through all your voicemails. We have some good ones from what I understand this week. We got a lot of them that we're calling in all week. We appreciate that. We try to get at least a bunch of them on the air on Fridays. Producer Mark, can you please start the noise?
Hey, Buck, this is Pat from Lancaster, PA. I just want to say, keep up the fight, man. We're all defined by what we fight for in life, for what we fight. And I appreciate a lot of things you're fighting for, and it really makes a difference. And so I just want to ask you to keep fighting for whatever's good that you can figure out, because it really helps, man. It really helps. Stand up for it and encourage us to do the same thing. Hey, Mark, I appreciate your candor and your personality. Hey, you guys take care. Bye-bye.
Well, Pat and PA, we love the message, man. Thank you, and trust me, we will keep the fight going. We have a lot of tenacity here in the Freedom Hut, and it means a lot that this show is a source of strength for those of you in your own ways who've got to fight for what you believe is true and right all across the country. So please, by all means, man, continue to listen and spread the word, pass the buck, and I promise you this: we will not. With our shields or on it, my man. With our shields or on it. That's what I got. So let's go to the next one, please.
Buck, this is Kevin from Virginia Beach. My question is this. My concern is the Democrats will obviously cheat in the election. They'll cheat any way they can. But my concern is them cheating in like 7 or 8 swing states in all the big cities where they control the voting booths and they control the process. What have we done, if anything, to make sure that they're not going to swing those states just by virtue of running up the vote totals in those big cities controlled by corrupt liberals? Do you have any insight on that? Or give me any good feeling going into the election?
Well, very good question. What are we doing to secure the elections against fraud and tampering and also just incompetence? And I always will tell you the truth, and as part of that, I'll tell you now, not enough. We're not doing enough. That I think is very clear. Remember, they claimed the last election was stolen or fraudulent, Democrats did, based on Facebook ads bought by some nameless, faceless Russians that were just supporting a lot of the usual stuff, pro-Trump stuff, anti-Hillary stuff online. That alone, they felt, was grounds to question the outcome of the election. So we also have to remember that they will never accept that if their side wins, no matter how much fraud there is, they'll say it was legitimate. And if our side wins, no matter how squeaky clean the election was, they'll tell us all it was fake, Trump cheated. They don't care. They're going to say it no matter what. But in terms of the steps, the big fight right now is over mail-in voting. If Democrats get mail-in voting, they're very confident that they'll be able to win. So that tells you something. Why is that? It's not because all of a sudden a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, I'm a Democrat. I didn't know that. All right, Producer Mark, next up.
Hey, Buck and Producer Mark. This is Mark from South Carolina, and I am wondering why we aren't hearing more about the possible vice president for Joe Biden. I don't think we're hearing enough about that, and that seems to be one of the biggest things that will be going on this year. What are your thoughts? Who are we going to hear from? What are the facts? And what do we need to be prepared for? Shields high.
Shields high, Mark in South Carolina. Thanks so much for calling in. And producer Mark does believe you have a fantastic name. Right, Mark?
Best name there is.
There we go. I think that the vice president is supposed to be named by Biden next week. So we shall see. I believe it will be Kamala Harris. I think they're going to make her VP. I just think that's what the establishment's going to want. That's what they're going to demand. We'll see, Mark. Thanks so much, buddy, for your support. We appreciate it. All right, one more, Mark. Hit it.
Hey, Mark. This is Bill in Brooklyn. I was born in Coney Island. I live in Sheepshead Bay. And I love the show, but I cannot let Buck continue to put Brooklyn down. If you want to refer to Brooklyn, the liberal Brooklyn, call them Park Slope, but don't say Brooklyn. You're giving me a bad name. Giving Brooklyn a bad name. Shame on you.
Look, Bill, fair point. My grandparents are from Brooklyn. I got family in Brooklyn right now. I mean, Brooklyn's a beautiful place. It's just politically, liberal Brooklyn is the worst. It's like the most left-wing, insane place in the whole country. Maybe only after San Francisco and D.C. But Bill, appreciate you listening, buddy. And I'll clean it up a little bit. We're talking about lib Brooklyn when I give Brooklyn a rough time. And with that, we got to go to our traditional roll call coming up. All right. Roll call. Thank you so much. Facebook.com/BuckSexton. Team Buck at iHeartMedia.com. Also, BuckSexton.com. Check it out. Scope it out throughout the day. Got a great story up there on my point that I'm making at the top of the show about whether the rules apply to everybody. We know they don't, but it's worth reading about why. And before we get to that, producer Mark, any fun weekend plans?
Well, hockey's back this weekend, Buck. The one weekend I want to be locked in my apartment.
Oh. I didn't realize hockey was coming back. I thought it was a winter thing.
Well, it is, but they're playing both sites in Canada, so the NHL's doing a bubble just like the NBA, but they have the Eastern Conference in Toronto, the Western Conference in Edmonton, and obviously they have some good refrigeration up there for the rinks.
So what is this, when they say in a bubble, what are they actually doing? Does that mean everyone has to live on premise and play?
Yeah, so everyone is in one or two hotels, like in Orlando, everyone's in the Disney resorts. For the NBA in Edmonton and Toronto, everyone's in, I think, one or two hotels each, and they have to live in the hotel. They're not allowed to leave the hotel. They have everything they could possibly need. Like they have restaurants. They're trying to make it as normal living as possible for all the teams, and then you're only allowed to go to the rink pretty much. And it's working a lot better than baseball.
Is it?
They're having the NBA had 0 positive tests. NHL has not reported any. MLB, a whole team is shut down for a week. The Miami Marlins had 17 players positive.
Were the Marlins also, was that also a bubble or no bubble?
No, there's no bubble in Major League Baseball. They're refused. That's
okay.
why.
Okay. Interesting. All right. I was unaware of that. Isn't football supposed to start relatively soon too?
Training camps are starting to begin, but there's a lot of controversy there because everyone's seeing how MLB's going, and the NFL has a similar plan where they're going to travel and all that. And it's it's going to be a lot harder for the NFL to do a bubble because there's 53 guys on a roster. But still, NFL is definitely in peril.
Huh. Okay. All right. Well, I might play some FIFA soccer this weekend on PS4, so I got that going for me. Which
I don't think Snow Princess is going to like that very much.
No, I'm going to have to sneak that in when she's doing yoga or something fun like that. All of a sudden, there'll be the Buck playing the video games. All right. Facebook.com/BuckSexton. That's how you write in. Or Team Buck at iHeartMedia.com. Or Buck Sexton on Instagram. There we go. Ryan kicking it off here. Remember how back in 2016, all the libs said President Trump wasn't fit to have the nuclear codes and couldn't be trusted with our national security. I wonder what those same libs' excuses will be when questioned about whether Joe Biden should have those same powers. When you see the level of cognitive decline in Joe Biden, who in their right mind would ever allow him to have the nuclear football? In a recent interview, Joe Biden once again forgot where he was though he was in Vermont, where he was really in New Hampshire. Trump has proven his leadership ability and not led us into war like the left said he would. Joe, on the other hand, is having trouble getting through a single interview without showing his cognitive impairment. Thanks for being an American patriot and standing up for the truth and logic. Shields high, brother. Ryan, yeah, look, what you're saying is all true about what seems to be the apparent cognitive decline of Joe Biden. I would just tell you, I think you probably already know this without me saying it, but we got to say things out loud sometimes just so we can maintain our sanity. Libs don't care. Libs don't care. It's Biden. Doesn't matter how crazy he is. Doesn't matter what he says or, I'm Joe Biden, here I am, corn pop, my leg hair's turning blonde from the sun, and I kind of just yell. And I sort of, what time of the morning are we? Pink elephant, what? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They're just going to say that he should be president. And remember now, they're going to have, a VP who is somebody that the establishment left wants to be president, wants to be in a presidential role. And that then means, that they're okay with Biden not necessarily being able to finish out the job. That's what they think. That's their approach. That's what I'm trying to say. So, if he has to take over, if there's a sense that he has to take over, then they're fine with that. They're absolutely fine with. I'm sorry, if the VP has to take over, they have no issue. So remember that. Buck, tell producer Mark he's starting to tell a joke near the beginning of the show on Fridays. May improve his attitude. Oh, maybe he has to start telling a joke in the beginning of the show on Friday. Or maybe 20 burpees during a break. So if Trump suggested delaying the election date, it's a way of locking it in November 3rd. Art of negotiation. Shields high. Al, I'm going to leave it to you to try to get producer Mark to do 20 burpees during the show. I'm just going to tell you, I hope you have a large checkbook.
Yeah, if I'm paid to do it, I'd be happy to. Yeah.
Right. I don't think that an email saying producer Mark do 20 burpees is going to cut it though.
I'll happily tell jokes.
Yeah. Maybe $1,000 a burpee might get you close, but short of that, I tell you, it's not going to work. And as for locking in the November 3rd date, interesting theory. I'll give you that interesting theory. Sage, one of my favorite spices. Aloha from the Freedom Hut Maui, Buck and producer Mark. Oh, producer Mark. What about Hawaii, man? What about Hawaii? It'd be so nice.
It's far from friends and family.
It's super far from everybody.
Still nice.
I hear it can be a little isolating after a while, but it's like the most beautiful place on earth. Think of all the macadamia nuts we could eat, dude.
I'm not a big fan of nuts.
It'll start to look like a macadamia nut after a while if you eat enough of them, but you have like 4 of those things, and you might as well have had a 3 cheese pizza or something. Those macadamia nuts pack a punch. But just saying. It sounds like the trajectory of Waikiki follows that of New York City. It had slowly through the mid-1900s become a cesspool of drugs, prostitution, and crime. Luckily, we had our first Republican mayor, Frank Fazzi, who completely cleaned it up and drove out the drug dealers, prostitutes, and thieves. We've had a one-party Democrat government ever since, and Waikiki is now a dump again with one of, if not the worst homeless problems in the country. I don't see that changing anytime soon, but luckily, I married a Maui girl and escaped to another island. Shields high. Well, Sage, I'm glad you're enjoying that island life. Aloha. Sounds like fun. Man, Hawaii would be good. I know. So Florida was nice too. Florida's nice too, but Hawaii would be. You ever been to Hawaii, producer Mark?
I haven't. We wanted to go for our honeymoon, but it's so expensive.
Very expensive, and it's 10 hours.
Yeah.
So the problem with going to Hawaii when you're coming from New York is 3 hours in. When you're like, for me, any flight up to 3 hours I can handle pretty easily. After 3 hours, I'm like, okay, I want this to stop. Remember that, when you're on the flight to Hawaii and you're 3 hours in, you're like, well, I could be in Jamaica or the Dominican Republic right now, but instead I wanted to add 7 more hours to my flight. That's tough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't even like flying to California.
California's a long, I flew to California and back for work once in one day in coach. It was torture.
Oh,
Middle
like
seat.
Wow.
It was a last minute thing. Middle seat both ways in coach one day.
That sounds awful.
Brutal. Brutal. I was like curled up in a ball, crying myself to sleep on my giant pillow. All right. Ursula. Hey, Buck, I'm a fan of your show since I moved to the USA from Poland in June of 2018. Well, very cool. Thank you, Ursula. My husband introduced me to the podcast when I wanted to better understand U.S. politics. Yes, he passed the buck. Ursula, tell him high five and we love him. It's interesting to compare polarized political scene here to the Polish scene with a government of the right wing and left wing economics. Also, tell producer Mark that a hot dog is a sandwich as much as espresso is a coffee. Shields high. Mark, is Ursula agreeing with you? Or
I don't know. Isn't espresso coffee?
I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'll leave this one to Mark. I'm sort of...
I'm not
Producer
a coffee
Nick,
drinker, so I don't know.
Producer Nick, I feel like, because of his background, he could be drinking one of those super tiny coffees with a fedora and like the scarf around the shoulders while he's wearing like a cream-colored suit, talking about the old country. You know what I mean? So he might know something about espresso. Producer Nick's gonna weigh in, and he always weighs in by text. So that's the thing. We don't hear him, but he's like, hey. Sorry, the Snow Princess also comes from the old country, like producer Nick. I mean, not from, but her family comes from. So that's why that when we have these debates about whether you call it marinara sauce or gravy, you call it gravy if you're Tony. Producer Nick says espresso is fantastic. I agree, as long as you don't call it espresso. Like a barbarian.
Espresso or espresso?
Espresso.
Espresso?
Espresso. Hey, producer Mark, is espresso. Like
I don't drink this stuff.
You never drink it?
No, I don't
If
drink
you
that
just
or
want
coffee.
if you just want a quick injection of caffeine into your veins, an espresso is molto bene.
I'd probably be more likely to do that because it's like taking a shot of alcohol from me because I don't like the taste.
Really?
Kind of fire it down.
Are you secretly a White Claw guy? You can tell us. We won't judge you.
Well, does anyone do a shot smoothly?
I
You're
noticed,
telling
I
me you
noticed
take
that
a shot of tequila and you just
I noticed
down
you're
it?
evading the question. Are you a White Claw guy?
I do like White Claws, yeah. And I'm not afraid of that.
Oh, we're so going to judge you now. Look at this.
Have you ever had
Sneak
a high
attack.
noon? I hate to give free pub, but have you ever had a high noon?
No, what's that?
They're like, it's basically a vodka soda in a can.
Mm.
It's delicious. And they have them in different flavors.
There's at my supermarket, they actually sell some kind of, it's not a White Claw, it's some kind of a spritzer, and I can't remember what it's called. And they actually have a couple of versions of it, and I'm not remembering what it's called right now. But it's very refreshing. Patrick, next up in roll call. My wife brought home another fresh bread from the bakery. It smelled so good. I ate one piece, then another in your honor. Says, you can't eat it. You're welcome. Patrick, well, what's with the gluten shaming, man? You got to gluten shame me like this? It's true, actually, Mark. Snow Princess tells me that when she's not around me, she eats Neapolitan pizza and goes for all the most glutinous stuff,
I mean, I would too.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because I don't even really have it in my apartment. Everything in my apartment is gluten free because I can't eat this stuff.
Well, because why would you cross contaminate it?
Exactly, right. I don't want the bread on my counter, and then I cut other bread up there, and then there is really good gluten free bread. Susie's gluten free bread, which you can get in Whole Foods all across the country, is amazing. So,
but now, if you're eating out, say you get takeout, is she allowed to get something with gluten in it?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if she just to
No.
didn't
There's
do
no
it.
like gluten-free solidarity out at restaurants. It's only in the home. It's only in the home. So, and if I'm naughty, she threatens to throw a flour bomb at me. And that's.
Well, I mean, it's kind of punishing yourself, isn't it? If you eat gluten.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you just know better.
Yeah, it's no good.
It's like me and spicy food.
Here we go. Matthew, next up here. Buck, you're a real professional. I'm stunned you absolutely nailed the pronunciation of that Antifa guy's last name. It's super rare to hear people get it right. Thanks for all your great work on the show over the years. I've been listening to you since you subbed for Rush. You truly are his replacement for our generation. Shields high. Matthew, thank you so much. That is very kind of you to say. And I don't even remember that guy's name, but I got it right, so I'll take it. Yeah, there we go. Aaron, Buck, you keep talking about whether a hot dog. No, you guys keep talking about whether. I mentioned this once on the air, and now it's like a week later, and you guys are still giving me guff on this. You keep talking about whether a hot dog's a sandwich, but it's just a Trojan horse for the real question. Is cereal soup? Shields high. Well, Aaron, that's a thinker right there.
Yeah.
Producer Mark, I defer to you on this one.
I can't say that cereal is soup.
Just the thought makes cereal seem less appealing.
Yeah, imagine if you made it hot. Not that you can have cold soup, but it's mostly hot.
I'm going to give you
Imagine
this.
hot cereal.
I'm going to give you this, though.
Yeah.
Cereal is a dessert that we pretend is a breakfast food.
Well, it depends on what type of cereal.
That's fair.
There are healthy cereals.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch is dessert.
Yeah.
Fruit Loops is dessert.
Yes.
I think if you have like oats and nuts and things, then it's breakfast.
Yeah.
But
My
I do
favorite cereal is Life cereal. That's fairly healthy.
For the pure, and remember, I ate gluten for the first 30 years of my life, so I have had everything many, many times. What is, if you're just going for pure taste, the best cereal?
Either Cocoa Puffs or Cookie Crisps. I love the chocolate.
I go Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I think that stuff is like crack.
That's up there too.
I'm a big fan. I also used to like Lucky Charms. I used to like when the different colored charms would sort of melt into the milk a little bit. I mean, you're just drinking, colored sugar, but it's good.
You can get the marshmallows now, right?
Yeah. All right. Next up here, Steven. Hey, Buck, a lot of frustration in Wisconsin today. Our governor has decided in his infinite wisdom that masks are no longer voluntary in our state until September 28th or whatever he decides to extend it to. As per typical, it was another last-minute switch that has my church and our school staff and our scrambling to catch up. Shields high from Wisconsin. Yeah, Steven, a lot of this stuff is arbitrary, and that's part of what makes me so mad. Producer Nick throws in the mix that oatmeal is a hot cereal.
That is true.
That is accurate.
Soup.
That is accurate. That is a true statement. Tony. Here we go. Wait, we got a lot. We're not going to get to them all today, guys. We're going to have to hold some of these for Monday, but we will get to them. Tony, Buck, as always, you do a fabulous job. Thank you. Ideas for the merch for the idiot Democrats, liberals in your life. A blue mama cap for Make America Miserable Again. Perfect for that beta male in your life, and as a reminder of who he whines to, who is jealous of Republicans and their MAGA caps. And blue T-shirts with either Democrats Make America Miserable Again or Biden Make America Miserable Again. I think sales would be great. Best to you, Snow Princess, Tallulah, and producer Mark. All right. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it, Tony. That's going to be the show, everybody. Pass the buck to someone this weekend. Get some rest. Back next week. Fighting libs. Shields high.